Hello, everyone. Well, when it comes to horror, evil kids, not that big of a deal, right? You got Reagan from The Exorcist, you got those kids from Children of the Corn, you have Damien from The Omen, but they were really more victims than anything else. The Children of the Corn, they were under the influence of this evil entity. Reagan was possessed by a demon. Damien was just unlucky enough to be born with the number 666 on his head, so now he's the Antichrist. Really, none of their faults. But in the book we're going to talk about today, there's an evil child, and she is just a full-on psychopath. So let's get ready to dig into this psychological nightmare. All right, so the book we're going to be talking about today is Baby Teeth. And I want to pronounce the author's name, but I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up if I try. But you can see it right there on the cover of the book. No offense to the author. It's just that I didn't even want to try pronouncing that name because I'm sure I would have gotten it wrong. And I'm not very good with names to begin with. But anyway, Baby Teeth. Now this is about a family. You have a mother, a father, and a 7-year-old daughter. But it's told from two perspectives. It's told from the perspective of the mother, Suzette, and the 7-year-old daughter, Hannah. Hannah, to put it bluntly, is a psychopath. She's a psychopathic little girl. She's 7 years old, but she has a high IQ. She's imaginative and she's creative, but she's also very evil and manipulative. She loves her daddy. She's a daddy's girl, and he loves his baby. But the mom, not so much. She considers her mother in the way, taking time that she could spend with her daddy. And so she spends the majority of this book thinking of ways to mentally, physically torture the mother, including trying to murder her mother on several different occasions, doing things that a typical 7-year-old cute little girl would not do. And that's one of the things that makes this book so terrifying, is that all these things that we're seeing her plan. We're seeing Hannah, the daughter, we're seeing her plan these things, and we're seeing her act out these things, are things that even as an adult we would be very concerned about. But because it's a 7-year-old girl, and because she doesn't act out in front of her father, the dad is always making excuses for the girl, thinking that she's just misunderstood. She gets kicked out of every school she goes to, doing really terrible things to some of the other kids, including one scene where she gets left alone in a room with a special needs boy who's wearing a helmet, who's always banging the helmet against the wall. She decides to go over, take off his helmet, and then start barking and attacking him like a wild dog, barking at him, snarling. He's freaking out. He doesn't have his helmet anymore, so he just starts banging his head against the wall without the helmet. And she does that with no consequence, with no conscience, I mean. She doesn't care. She didn't like him. She wanted to get him away, and that was her plan for doing it. And it seems like that throughout the book. That really formed the core of this psychological terror. Because this book isn't about ghosts, goblins, or anything supernatural. At some point, the mother thinks the daughter may be possessed. She doesn't believe in it, but her daughter does not speak. Her daughter will not speak. She does not talk intentionally. She's doing it on purpose, not to anybody. Except Hannah does talk to Suzette, her mother, but everything she says is meant to manipulate and hurt this woman mentally by claiming that she's possessed by a 18th century witch, by claiming that the devil has sex with her at night in a room. And this is coming from a 7-year-old girl, which makes it, really, really creepy. everything she says to manipulate the people around her, to separate her mother from her father. Because every time her mother brings something up to the father is always saying, she's 7 years old, she's just imaginative. There may be something wrong with her emotionally, but we can get help. He doesn't think it's as serious as the mother says. And the mother herself is really put through the ringer in this book. Each chapter is told from either the perspective of the mother or the daughter. And the mother came from a family where her mother didn't love her very much. They didn't really spend a lot of time together. Her mother made a lot of mistakes with Suzette, and Suzette never wanted to be like that with her daughter, but everything her daughter does, she puts the blame on herself, which really has a ring of truth to it if you've ever had children. I personally don't, but I know enough parents to know how they kind of blame themselves for their children's bad behavior. So Suzette is always thinking she's failed some way as a mother, and the world's going to see her failures, and she's going to bear the blame for all the bad things her daughter is doing. And so she's really very much the main victim in this story, because she's put through the ringer emotionally and physically. Once things start ramping up to where the daughter is trying to kill her, she's put through the ringer physically as well. The most terrifying chapters of the book are written from the perspective of Hannah, her daughter, because like I said, she's a child. She's a 7-year-old child, and we're hearing her thought process, and it sounds like a psychopath. I don't know what the author's background is, but man, she nailed the thoughts and the feelings of what you would think a psychopathic 7-year-old would sound like. And you get to see the way Hannah is putting together all these things and manipulations and the little things she does to physically and mentally torture her mother, and how she tries to hide it and avoid it. She'll go as far as to harm herself and leave marks on herself so that when Daddy comes home, she can kind of express to him non-verbally that Mommy's the one that did it. She's abusing me. And of course the father, seeing the marks right there and thinking the mother may be a little over the edge, maybe a little too harsh on the daughter, he's wavering. He doesn't know which one to believe. And this manipulation goes on throughout the most of the book, and we can just see how it's building up and building up and building up. But like I said, it's not set in a supernatural world. This isn't a horror book that's going to be filled with blood and gore or some big twist at the end. It's really set solidly in the real world, where children like this, believe it or not, they really do actually exist in real life. And that's what makes it more psychologically terrifying than any book I've read in a long time. Because just thinking about the manipulations of this child and how she's being whoever she wants to be in front of different people, and how she puts the plans together, and how she uses the internet to look up some things that would disgust many other people, is pretty frightening. So with me saying this isn't a book with a lot of blood, a lot of gore, or monsters or anything, does not mean it's not horror, because it's definitely it's definitely a horror book, but it's psychological horror at its best, I might say. It's frightening. It's a scary book, whether you have kids or not. Just thinking that any cute little 7-year-old child you see on the street, you might see him innocently playing with his toys, but he might be planning the perfect murder of somebody. You just never know, and that's a pretty scary thought, because we tend to think of children, as precious and cute, and we see them as the vulnerable members of society, but some of them, not so much. And this book does a really great job at pointing that out and giving you a story from both perspectives that becomes more intense. The tension builds and builds and builds, and then it turns from being mental to being physical to the mother breaking down, not knowing what to do, to the daughter being glad her mother's breaking down and going to the next step, as she calls it, her next little project to get rid of her mother once and for all so she can have her daddy to herself. And it's a really terrifying prospect, I got to tell you. I really enjoyed this book. I'd never heard of the author before, and I got it on a recommendation. And a lot of times, I got to tell you, people like different things, but a lot of books recommended to me, I read, and well, they don't wind up on this channel because I only review books here that I really liked and I would recommend. And it's not that I have anything against those other books or authors, just not for me. That's all. We're all different. It's cool. But this book came as a recommendation, and I enjoyed it 100%. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed how it went from one perspective, from the mother to the other, for the daughter. I liked the really down-to-earth, grounded way it dealt with the psychology of a psychopathic child, and how emotionally this has to be torture for parents who are actually suffering through something like this. So yeah, it's a great book. It really is, and I highly recommend that you go pick it up. Like I said, it's going to give you stuff spinning around your head there for a while after you read it that you might not want in there. But that's a very good thing, because that's what a book's supposed to do, I think. Yeah. I'll put a link down below. If you want to purchase it on Amazon, I recommend that you do. I'll also put a link down below to my Twitter if you want to join me on there and come say hello. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, I want to thank you for taking a little bit of your time to spend with me. I really, really appreciate it. I love you guys. Stay safe. And until we meet again, keep reading spooky, my friends.